If you are a public defender or social worker or in a position where you have a client caseload and you feel obligated to those clients, I suggest that you think about how your job is serving you and not just how you are serving your clients. So I went straight from undergrad to law school. I'm from California and I live back in California now. I did my undergrad at a California state school and then I moved to Arkansas to go to the University of Arkansas for law school. So as a traditional law school student, started law school at 22, graduated at 26 because I did a concurrent degree program to also get my master's in public administration. So I was at the University of Arkansas for 4 years instead of 3. So I graduated with my MPA and my JD at 26. I'm 28 now, and I am going to talk about my experience working at public defender's offices. I worked as a law clerk at a public defender's office in Arkansas while I was in law school, and then I worked full-time as an attorney at a public defender's office in Sonoma County, California after I passed the bar in California and became a licensed attorney. I went to law school to become a public defender, essentially. I had a little bit of hope about progressive prosecutors and that idea, and maybe thought that I could end up in a district attorney's office long before I realized the actual dynamics of that work. But I went to law school to pursue criminal justice work. When you're in law school, and after you complete your first year, you can get a clerkship, which is where you work at a law firm or a government agency under attorneys and they supervise you. After you complete your second full year of law school, you can be what's called in Arkansas a Rule 15 certified law clerk, which means that you can make appearances in court under the supervision of an attorney. So you can represent clients in front of a judge as long as you have a supervising attorney there in the courtroom with you. So with the privilege of being a Rule 15 certified law clerk, I took a clerkship at the Pulaski County Public Defender's Office in Arkansas in May 2020. And this was obviously heavily affected by the COVID pandemic, but that is a whole nother issue. Being in a felony courtroom on Zoom with 100 clients was an interesting experience, to say the least. I wanted to be a public defender so that I could help people, so that I could be an advocate for people who were not being represented, an advocate for people who didn't have anyone on their side. I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. I felt really passionate about that. And I got the opportunity to, and I was so grateful for that opportunity, and it changed my life. The privilege and the opportunity of representing people in criminal court is and will always be one of the greatest privileges of my life. I was honored every day that I was able to do that for people, and that people, grown people with vast life experience trusted me to speak for them, and that meant so much to me. It truly changed my life and empowered me in a way that I will be forever grateful for. But something that I wanted to talk about is the trauma that you were exposed to as a public defender. And I think everyone can imagine, you are exposed to dangerous people, you are exposed to people who have allegedly done very bad, brutal, scary things. I was prepared for all that, I think, as much as anyone can be. I had been watching Law and Order Special Victims Unit since I was like 8 years old. Not that I was allowed to, but I felt pretty prepared to deal with, the gore and the general terror of the tenor of a criminal court. But working in an inner city, so I went to law school in Little Rock, and that's the Pulaski County Public Defender's Office is the county including Little Rock. And Little Rock is a beautiful city. It's a wonderful place to live. There's so many good things I could say about it. But Little Rock is a very segregated city, and it's a very dangerous city. Objectively, the murder rates and the violent crime rates are very high. So when you work in criminal court, those crime rates and those murder rates do not just exist on paper. They exist in your clients in real life. I worked in adult felony court, and we also represented juveniles who had been charged as adults in that adult felony court. I have always been extremely passionate about working with children. I worked as a preschool teacher while I was completing my undergrad, and working with juveniles specifically was something I was really passionate about when it came to public defender work. So this was an opportunity that I took extremely seriously. We had a client who was a 16-year-old boy, and we had him on a charge of a shooting that had happened at a hotel where he was charged with shooting and injuring another teenage boy. We had gotten him out on bail for this charge, which was kind of difficult because at the time he was charged with the shooting, he had a pending burglary case. So when we got him out on bail for the shooting case, it was his second open felony as a 16-year-old. And in order to get him out on bail, the judge required him to have an ankle monitor. So it's been about 2 weeks since he's been out on bail, and I get a call from one of the judge's bailiffs that they've received a contact from the electronic monitoring company that my client has not been following the requirements of the court as far as where he's supposed to be staying within the bounds of for the electronic monitoring device, and that he hasn't been charging it, and that overall doesn't seem to be taking the opportunity to be out on bail with the ankle monitoring device as seriously as he needs to be. So I call our client, I tell him, you can't be going to the mall. You cannot be going to the mall right now. You have very strict orders from the court on where you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be there, and you need to follow that. 2 days after I called this client who was out on bail on the shooting charge and the burglary charge, I read in the newspaper that he and a number of other juveniles had gotten in a shootout in a county park in the middle of the day on a Saturday, and my client had, in trying to shoot one of the opposing gang members, had shot and killed a 10-year-old girl who was obviously unrelated to the gang activity, playing in the park with her family that day. So this kid, our client, the 16-year-old kid, was obviously taken into custody after that, and he was now facing capital murder charges for the murder of a 10-year-old child. I was just shocked. I mean, that poor girl and that poor girl's family. I mean, I cannot even imagine what that experience is like to not only lose a child at that age, but to lose a child in front of you in such a traumatic way. I mean, I can't even imagine how much pain that family is going through, and I cannot even imagine, what their life looks like after that happened. But I was also in so much pain over our client's decision. I felt responsible for him in a way, and even though I had enough insight to know, it's not that this was my fault, I didn't blame myself for this happening, but I know that he didn't intend for that to happen either. And now, because of the bad influences in his life, because of the ease of access to weapons in inner cities like Little Rock, because of the stupid gang violence that teenagers participate in, because of that, a 10-year-old girl lost her life, and a 16-year-old boy was sentenced to 60 years in prison. He took a plea deal for 60 years in prison. And this was probably close to 3 years ago now that I represented this client. So he is serving his sentence. But I still think about this case probably once a month. It just, it hurt me so much to see the pain involved from every angle in that situation. One of the most painful aspects of that case was watching our client deteriorate once he was in custody. He obviously never made bail again after being arrested for shooting the 10-year-old. So he spent several months, probably almost a year, in county jail before taking the plea and moving to state prison. Every subsequent court appearance, there was just less and less life behind his eyes. There was less and less hope. And, watching him lose all hope for his future, watching him, a 16-year-old child has no, even the most well-resourced 16-year-old child has no ability to deal with the guilt of killing a 10-year-old. I mean, I don't know if the most well-resourced 50-year-old would be able to deal with that, but I do know that for a 16-year-old, it was life-ending, the guilt. And to not be able to break through to him and, convince him to try to start forgiving himself or try to wash his face and wake up in the morning with hope for something, it hurt me so much. I chose this line of work because I wanted to help people, and I didn't feel capable of helping this child. But the lack of humanity is just shocking. Like, I just couldn't believe that, when we'd be in front of the judge and in front of the prosecutor, everyone would talk about how tragic it was that this 10-year-old child lost their life, which I totally understand. I mean, it's the definition of tragedy. If you looked up tragedy in the dictionary, you would see child dying by gun violence in the middle of the day in a park. But no one talked about the tragedy of this 16-year-old child. Nobody talked about how his family, how the system, how everyone around him had failed him. No one had talked about how his life was over and he was still a child. I didn't feel like anyone else, even other attorneys at the public defender's office, really had the space to hold for how fucking tragic that is. For a 16-year-old to be sentenced to 60 years in prison because of a stupid decision. And it's, kind of a catch-22 because, I mean, hard to argue that the child shouldn't be punished. There's a 10-year-old who's dead, but living in a society where we're okay with putting a 16-year-old in a cage for 60 years just devastated me. And, I didn't get out of that line of work right away. I think the shock just kept me with my head down. And I kept working in Arkansas as a law clerk, and then after I passed the California bar, I immediately took a full-time attorney position at the Public Defender's Office here in California, and working in misdemeanor court, helping clients, and really just working through the shock and the trauma of what I had been exposed to until I sort of woke up one day and realized I don't want to be exposed to this anymore. I don't want to do this to myself. It's really hard to take yourself out of a situation when you see a benefit to other people. And I saw that I was a good advocate for my clients. The compliments that I received from clients and both just other people in the courtroom telling me, I love how you represent your clients. I love how you argue up there. I love how you're speaking proudly on your client's behalf. I saw that I was a good advocate for these clients. People were being benefited by me allowing myself to be in this environment. So I stayed in that environment. And it took, my husband coming into my life and me kind of starting my spiritual journey and realizing more about myself and how I use things in my life to sort of punish myself and reaffirm my lack of worthiness and a lot of things. But I, realized that even though I'm really good at this, I don't want to do this anymore. It's hurting me. And that was one of the hardest decisions to make for myself because it felt like I was choosing myself over my clients. And that is what I did. I should be honest with myself, and that is what I did. And I do not regret my decision at all. If you are a public defender or a social worker or in a position where you have a client caseload and you feel obligated to those clients, I suggest that you think about how your job is serving you and not just how you are serving your clients. Because if you're like me, you can easily get sucked into the needs of other people without realizing how much of yourself is being drained. So I just want to make this video to say that you don't have to feel guilty if you've gotten yourself into a situation where you feel overburdened by other people. I realized that I felt that I had overcommitted to the needs of others. And, that wasn't just with my job, that was also in my family and my relationships. And so quitting that job and working for myself was just one piece of that puzzle. From my heart to yours, if you or somebody who has a client caseload and you feel really obligated to your clients, I know how it feels. I know how big your heart is. And I know that it feels like these clients would just fall apart, die without your help. I totally understand the reality of that. But I urge you to choose yourself. I promise you, it is not being selfish. It is what the world needs. And by choosing yourself, you are being the best example that you could possibly be for not only your clients, but for other people with similarly big hearts to yours. I chose myself, and I highly recommend that you do the same.